Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM Channel 141. This is the Insight segment. I'm Harold Fisher. We are at the Reporters Roundtable tonight, and there is no shortage of headlines from Washington to Texas and beyond. This week has been filled with power moves, political standoffs, and presidential soundbites sparking outrage and debate. We'll break down what it all means, who's winning, who's losing, and why it matters to our communities. The reporters are here, and the mics are hot. My guests are Paige Hopkins, social media host and talent at Axios; Sam Ford, retired Emmy Award-winning broadcaster; and Misha Green, managing editor for the Washington Informer newspaper. Thank you all for joining the conversation.
Thank you
for having me.
Good thing. Let us first talk about today's story that was yesterday's story and last week's story. The federal takeover of the DC Police Department, the Metropolitan Police. There's so many twists and turns. We have at least some 1,200 National Guard troops in the city, with more coming. Some residents say they are happy with it, others not so much. Washington Post had a survey out just yesterday saying that 70% of the DC residents they surveyed say that they are absolutely against it. There are so many missing pieces. Sam, let me start with you. What is your feeling and your reaction about what we're seeing in DC right now?
Well, it's unprecedented. Generally, when you have the National Guard, there's something like a hurricane, or there's a riot, or there's something that happened, and that's why they're here. However, this time, the only thing that apparently is involved is Trump's ego. He's decided he wanted to put these people on the streets, and Republican states seem to be just going along with it. They have no mission. They're just driving around in caravans with nothing in particular to do. I don't think that in DC we needed someone to check for seat belts, whether they're buckled or whether tail lights have not been broken, or a number of the other things that they're doing that, quite frankly, DC police don't often do, because they have other things to do. So this is something that is unprecedented. I've never heard of it. You've never heard of it, where they just basically sick a bunch of people on a city. And, one of my concerns is when you have a bunch of males with nothing in particular to do, who would rather be somewhere else, trouble starts. And that is my concern here. You got all these people here with nothing to do except drive up and down the street in caravans. And again, last night, I noticed someone posted something from a 6 in Chesapeake in Southeast Washington, and a caravan comes up. They get out. They've got machine guns, things like that. For what? There is no reason for it. And so it's just to intimidate the population. And yeah, as I said, Trump's ego. That's the only reason we have these people here.
Misha, I spoke to Cora Masters-Berry earlier today, and she was talking about this event that they're having at the Southeast Tennyson Learning Center on tomorrow. Be the Village, Stay Out the Way. And it's about just kind of bringing the community together to talk about not so much they can do to resist, but how DC residents, particularly in Ward 7 and 8, can stay safe in the face of what is happening. But one of the things I did say to her was that right now it appears that the Bowser administration and those supporters on Capitol Hill really don't seem to have a whole lot that they can do about this.
Well, Harold, as Sam said, this is so unprecedented that the question becomes very reactionary in terms of next steps and what to do. This was not a part of the plan, if you will. And so while I think district leadership is doing the best they can in reassuring residents of their rights and how to keep safe, as well as the fact that Metropolitan Police Department Chief Pamela A. Smith is still head of the Metropolitan Police Department, no matter what the U.S. Attorney General says. And so I think those kinds of things is why the Cora Masters Berries of the world, it's trying to get the community involved, because knowing your rights is key. Knowing how to protect yourself in this moment is critical. In the Washington Informer this week, on our front page, Sam P.K. Collins wrote an excellent story diving into some of the concerns that the community has about young people in particular when it comes to this federal takeover. School's about to start. We're still in the middle of curfew zones and things like that. And so you have activists who are risking their lives and safety in order to protect these young people. We have a lot of young people who don't even know what to do. In the meantime, you also have a lot of adults, though, who are confused as well, who are afraid to go out in the District of Columbia. Businesses last weekend, nightlife, said that numbers were down in a significant way. And we know how DC weather was last weekend. Folks normally would have been outside, okay? But people are scared and unsure. And so I think someone like First Lady Cora, or excuse me, forever First Lady and former First Lady officially Cora Masters Berry has spent decades jumping into action and trying to rally people together to ensure that the district and its residents are safe and comfortable navigating in this very uncertain and occupied city that we're in right now.
You know, Paige, I'm sure you also have been, like all of us, really paying attention, listening to what has been happening over the past now week and a half, getting closer to 2 weeks of this takeover. Talk to me about what your impressions are of it so far.
I mean, it doesn't differ much from Sam and Misha, what they've shared so far. I think, you know, this increased police presence, I think it's very clear that there is a segment of the population who maybe does feel more comfortable. A lot of them probably roll to town around Inauguration Day in January. But I think for a lot of folks who live in DC, this is their home, not just for, 4 years. Increased police presence is extremely uncomfortable, whether you're doing something right or wrong or not. Like, these armed guards, these bulletproof jackets, these large guns, it's very intimidating to people. And I think that is the goal. I think the community effort part that we just talked about with Misha is critical, because the folks who are in power who do want to do something, a lot of them don't actually have the numbers to do so. What I'm referring to is Senate Democrats and I believe House Democrats have put together a resolution to stop this takeover, but it's a really big long shot, right? Like, we don't have the majority. And so getting something that goes directly against what President Trump wants feels pretty unlikely. And so I think organizing as a community, reminding people of their rights, telling people, ICE is in this neighborhood, I saw a large presence in this neighborhood today, is probably one of the best solutions at this moment, when House and Senate or Democrats can't get forth the measures that they want to stop this.
One thing I was looking at how political this is. When Trump made his speech, he talked about 4 cities: DC, Chicago, Baltimore, and Oakland. And you know what they all have in common? Those are areas that he lost in the election. Now, I Googled the top 10 most violent cities in America. And do you know how many of those cities were on that list? 1, Baltimore. That was it. So this isn't about violence. This is about politics and his ego.
Well, I just have to say, since Sam said it, we got to also say what this is also about. And I, working for the Washington Informer, get to be biased in this way. It's also about race. You mentioned 4 Black cities with large African-American populations. And what the president said so blatantly in his speech about the district, in his hopes to beautify, in his words, not mine, the district. He talked about the residents as thugs and consistently said they, and the things that he would do to them, such as having to knock the heck, and he used the other word, out of folks if they don't do what officers are saying. And so I really don't think, yes, this is a political conversation, but Donald Trump is historically racist. This is something that we have facts to back up. This is not my opinion. And certainly when you look at the cities he calls out, it's about race as much as it is about politics.
Well, I would just say that a lot of those cities are black too, like New Orleans. But he won Louisiana, Detroit, but he won Michigan. You see what I'm saying? I mean, yeah, it's about race. In fact, honestly, on Facebook, this is just a brief story, but years ago, 40 some years ago, when I got married by my late wife, we were in Zimbabwe. And every time they talked about South Africa, which was their neighbor, they used the word racist in front of it. They would say racist South Africa, which I thought was, okay, interesting when it came down to, let's say, politics. But when they did the weather, they said the weather today in racist South Africa, in Durban, sky. So this was one of the, and I thought about it, he is a racist. And so now on my Facebook page, anytime I mention Donald Trump, I put the word racist in front of it.
There is another piece to this, because obviously our listeners are Black people. But I think when we talk about the politics of it, and this is the thing that really struck me, Paige, about the Latino community and how they're just being snatched off the street. And just a few days ago, there were members of the Alexandria City Council who were saying to their Latino residents, don't go to work, stay at home, because if not, you could be snatched or disappeared. And just from a journalistic point of view, I found that particularly fascinating, because again, we've just not seen anything like that before.
I mean, there are so many people in this country in this moment and many moments before who are living in fear. I mean, it's terrifying. I've seen people not sending their kids to daycare,
right?
People not sending their kids to school, so children aren't getting educations. You can stay home from work, sure, but how are you going to pay your rent? A lot of these people, whether they, are documented or not, are tax-paying, contributing members to society. And if they can't, pay for their homes, that's an issue. And so now we're creating additional problems outside of, perceived immigration issues, because people can't move around freely. And that's scary. I hadn't seen that from the Alexandria City Council, but I think it shows just the stark difference between blue cities and red cities in this country right now. And I think it also goes back to the point of, the city council being able to do something. I'm not sure if they've been able to put forth measures, but, having a little bit of control over their area. And when we look at DC, it's not a state, which is why this takeover could happen so easily, doesn't have the same rights as other areas of the country. And so there might be protections that other places can put forth that DC cannot. So yeah, it's terrifying. I can't imagine having to tell people don't go to work. How do I pay my bills? I don't know, but would you rather stay in this country or would you rather keep your job? And those are the difficult decisions that I think a lot of people, a lot of our neighbors are having to make.
And Sam, let me just say, and I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, DC is probably the farthest that it has ever been from being a state right now, to achieving statehood, when there have always been discussions, and you and I are the most senior people in this particular conversation, but certainly you remember there have been so many discussions over the decades about this possibly happening. Even under the Obama administration, there was discussions that, hey, maybe this was going to happen, but now
Well,
it
my thinking here is it's political, right? And if you get the right political mix, it can happen. But even then, with this Supreme Court, they're going to find a way. They're going to find a way to say it's unconstitutional. So, but the point is, it can happen. In fact, when Democrats had total control, it didn't happen in
right.
many cases. Then eventually the House passed it. So it is one of those things where if you've got the I think the leverage in the right place. But I see the big, let's say the big thing is getting past this right-wing Supreme Court. That's going to be hard, no matter what happens.
Well, and
Hang on, hold on, Misha. Hold on. Hang on, everyone. We are going to take a really quick break. Don't forget, you can hear this in every edition of the Daily Drum Inside segment via podcast on WHUR.com. The Original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is next on WHUR-FM. This conversation continues on Sirius XM, channel 141 at 96.3 HD2 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM, channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our look at some of the top stories of the week at the Reporters Roundtable. My guests are Misha Green, managing editor for the Washington Informer newspaper; Sam Ford, retired Emmy Award-winning broadcaster; and Paige Hopkins, social media host and talent at Axios. Before the break, Misha, you were about to make a point. Please go right ahead.
Yeah, well, I think this statehood and where we're in the process for it is a complicated conversation because certainly from a political standpoint, it seems like we couldn't be further from achieving district statehood. But in terms of where we are politically, people understand the conversation and fight for statehood significantly more than they ever have. And so when you have that very small section of the Home Rule Act able to be applied in order for the Trump administration to take over the Metropolitan Police Department, and the mayor is saying, hey, this is another reason why the district is fighting for statehood. And I'm really impressed by other organizational leaders throughout the country who have also started to make the conversation for DC statehood specifically because of this takeover. I think it's a really important caveat that people didn't quite understand in terms of their rights until they watched it play out in real time.
I want to move on to another issue regarding this takeover, and this is that the DOJ is targeting DC police and the allegations of cooking the books, of manipulating crime stats. We have been hearing all of this year that crime stats have been trending down since this high of 2023. But now we have this probe. Chief Smith said just yesterday that she understands that subpoenas are going out. There is the police commander who is on leave. The union page, the police union, is also saying this. What do you think are the ramifications of this? Is this a smokescreen, or and can you really trust this DOJ to probe this honestly? I guess that's the best question.
Yeah, I mean, I have a couple thoughts. One,
Sure.
We've seen this administration report less than accurate numbers a few times. For example, President Trump says there's been a huge uptick in dining in DC since this takeover. My colleague at Axios, Anna Spiegel, reported very quickly that the opposite is true.
Yeah.
Restaurants are seeing a downturn in people coming. Bars are seeing a downturn. Misha mentioned people weren't out last weekend, and they normally would have been with that weather. And so that brings me back to the police numbers. As a zoom out, the whole country saw an uptick in crime around the pandemic. And most of the country also saw a big downturn in crime in the years following the pandemic. And so, DC has essentially said, we followed that trend. I can't speak to whether the books were cooked or not. I'm not embedded in MPD, but I think it is more than fair to be skeptical, especially because, that argument works and plays well to what Trump and his administration are trying to do right now.
You know, Sam, to Paige's point, we only have to look back 2 weeks when the Trump administration didn't like the employment numbers coming out of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. You know, I mean, my goodness, when you look back at the past, the Biden administration, no. If you look back at the Obama administration, no. When you look back at, the son Bush and Daddy Bush and Clinton and Reagan, and I'm telling my age, but whenever these numbers have come out, presidential administrations, they will come to the podium. The president will come to the podium, and if they aren't good, they'll say, yeah, we know the numbers aren't looking good, and so this is what we're going to do. This is the first time that we've had a president, Sam, who didn't like the numbers and decided to try to change them, and the people who are compiling them.
Right, and he's talking about cooking the books. That's what he wants, because obviously, if they fired the person who was in charge of those numbers, and so I guess he wants somebody that's going to give numbers that he wants, and basically, I guess you're going to lose trust in the numbers. You cannot believe in numbers coming out of his administration. Now, as far as the police are concerned, they acted proactively. They already found out about a particular commander. I think it was the third district, Ward 1, 3rd district, where they decided, I guess there was some suspicion about his numbers, and so they put him on leave. The city did that. The federal government didn't do that. Now, do we know about these numbers? Can we have faith in them? You're right. Like Paige, I don't know. I mean, it's not something we necessarily know. We'll see what happens. But anything they do, I'd definitely be suspicious of. Anything the Trump administration does. This woman that was out there in Colorado who was basically trying to cook the books and claiming that the election was stolen from Trump. She went to jail in Colorado. Trump's threatening Colorado like he was threatening Brazil, that unless they let this woman go, he's going to do something to them. I guess he can, actually put a tariff on Brazil. I don't know that he can do that on Colorado. Fortunately, she's in state courts and she's still in jail. But that is, this is a crooked group of people that are running this country right now.
Yeah. Misha?
Yeah, I mean, everything that Paige and Sam said, and just to add, is really, again, I always think about the community and where we are when numbers and data is used to support one action, and then you have the presidential administration pushing back on it, is that people then question what is happening and really don't know who to trust. And we've seen, particularly with elections over the past 8 years, and how young people, particularly Gen Z, hasn't come out because they say, we don't know who to trust. We don't know, everyone's lying, it seems. And so that just concerns me, is again, when with such confusion leads, the domino effect is major and really kind of spreads out in ways that I think all leaders, including the Trump administration, is trying to avoid. But also, let's be real. The Trump administration is now doing this probe after every reputable news source said the Trump administration is reporting crime is horrible in DC, and that it's an awful crime-ridden city, and yet these numbers don't support it. Of course, he has to push back. That is what Donald Trump, again, historically does. I'm not surprised. And so I just hope that everyone approaches this probe with the same skepticism as opposed to just confusion. And again, do your research. There are a lot of amazing outlets out here who are doing great investigations into this and tracking numbers consistently. And you can see what's happening, where are the places that the district can use a little bit more help in addressing issues, or where is it looking good? And I think you'd be surprised at where the National Guard is in comparison. I
do want to speak to the issue that out of all of the things that have been happening with the Trump administration right now, most recently, I think the thing that may be most concerning for Black people, and I will just say for this Black person, is the attack on Blacksonian. on, the Smithsonian, Museum of African American History and Culture. And it is, to me, for Black people, that it's sacrosanct. That is the us that generations of Black people in this country have been waiting for. And now it is under attack, particularly, Misha, as it relates to what Trump said on Truth Social, is that Smithsonian is out of control and focusing too much on how bad slavery was. The only intellectual response that I can think about that is, duh.
That's better than mine, Harold. So thank you. I think it is no surprise that Trump is after the Blacksonian and really the Smithsonian Institution in general. He said that the Smithsonian is the last woke institution that he's been able to try to get to colleges, universities, obviously the federal government. But I think what concerns me in this moment is that we consider all of the people whose lives are changed by the access that the district has for these free museums, not just the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture, which certainly is my favorite museum, and it focuses on slavery. But there are so many other places here in the district, like the National Portrait Gallery, like the American Art Museum, that also tells real stories about slavery through art, that I am now concerned will be affected. Will those artistic interpretations of real American history now be on the chopping block? It goes in line with Trump's thoughts about teaching Black history and the elimination of that. And so it's not just the Blacksonian, which I know you and I are bummed about, Harold, but there are a lot of places. The Anacostia Art Museum, Community Museum, is currently in the middle of a major fight. And we know that the Anacostia Community Museum is not just about slavery, but it's certainly woke. It certainly tells a story about Black Washington, D.C. And so you have all of, which is, again, a part of the Smithsonian Institute. So you have all of these really important entities within the Smithsonian that I think are very affected by Trump's rant on Truth Social. And of course, I wonder the legality into all of this. A lot of places are saying Trump can't even really sick his lawyers on the Smithsonian in this way. But again, he's found his loopholes around a lot of things that we didn't think he could do.
Paige, one of the things about this attack on the Smithsonian in general and the African American Museum specifically, as somebody who was, born in DC and raised in the DMV, that how many times can I say, as many times as I went downtown as a kid, especially when Metro opened up in 1976, you would go into these places and, as a kid and as a teenager with my boys, that's where we used to go, because that's where the smart girls were.
To the museum?
Yes.
Oh, okay. That's where the cool kids went.
We went down there to learn, but I'm just going to tell it like it is. That's where the smart girls were. But also, how many times did I go down there and I just said, oh my goodness, I didn't know that. Whenever I saw the Natural History Museum, I didn't know that. And I think the big concern is, if this attack succeeds, there are going to be so many things that happen that will prevent people from saying, I didn't know that.
Yeah. I mean, on the one hand, I'm surprised that we haven't been dealing with this sooner, maybe during the first administration when people were screaming about critical race theory. So I'm certainly not surprised to see that President Trump takes issue with, the African American History Museum and others that talk about issues that he historically has not wanted to be talked about. I think it's scary. I think as a people, many of us grew up with our parents teaching us about, Black figures other than Martin Luther King and Harriet Tubman because they knew that we wouldn't learn about them in school in the first place. And so I think as a community, a lot of people will pivot and figure out how can I make sure my children and their friends get these critical educations that they need. That doesn't solve the problem, because I think the museums do a great service in teaching people outside of the community, people who may not purposely seek out Black history, who should still know about it because Black history is American history. So I don't have a solution to the problem. I'm here to say I'm not surprised, and I think as our community, as our people have done so many times, we'll make sure that our kids get this information. But how do we make sure that the broader public gets it? Unclear.
Yeah, Sam, your thoughts?
One thing I was thinking about, it happened before his folks got here. Okay, in terms of the I guess they came from Germany or somewhere in Scotland. But anyway, what war, what situation has killed the most Americans than any other war? The Civil War. Yeah, because they were Americans on both sides. Still no war, and many Americans have died in this. This is an extremely important thing. And why was the Civil War fought? Well, Haley wants to think, the South Carolina former governor wants to think she doesn't know exactly. It was fought over slavery. That is an extremely important thing in this country, because a lot of the laws, etc., came about as a result of slavery, the end of slavery. And so to try to ignore that is idiotic. And I don't think even Trump can do that. I mean, because there are too many interests, even people who support him, who respect this history, and it's important to them. But again, you've got this guy DeSantis down in Florida, right? They just don't want white kids to feel bad if they hear something. Okay, so what? I mean, this is history. It's American history, and I think that no matter what they say, it's not going away. Now, my understanding is that didn't the Smithsonian, it was the American History Museum, took down a section on impeachment because they were afraid. So this is it made him look bad, and then that looked so bad that they brought it back with some changes. But this man has gotten his finger in so many things. What other president we know of that went to fool with the Kennedy Center? I mean, they went there once a year for the awards, but that was it. I mean, they didn't go there to take the place over. Now they want to name something after his wife. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I'll also say it sets a dangerous precedent if we're deciding what history we're teaching based off who is in office. I mean, sure, it's, Republicans and conservative ideals now, but maybe, down the road, there's something that Democrats are taking out of the museum. So I feel like this is not the way to decide how we teach history to people, how we put things in the Smithsonian, which is an independent organization, but I think it does get a lot of federal dollars, which is probably
and the other thing is, what is the history of Black people in America? What's the history of African Americans? For the most part, it's a history of struggle. And the struggle continues because of people like him today.
What an interesting point, Sam. Thank you for that. I do want to move on to the situation in Texas. I find this also particularly fascinating, the redistricting battle. The GOP controlled Texas House last night, passed the new congressional maps to basically pad the party's majority in the House in Washington. The President Trump urged this. Democrats left town to try to slow down the process. They certainly couldn't block it, but my gracious. Now the Democrats in California are trying to fight fire with fire. My gracious, Paige, what's going on in the country? I'll leave you.
How am I to answer that?
Yeah, go ahead and explain what's going on.
I don't feel equipped to answer that question. I will say, I think the really interesting thing that's come out of this Texas redistricting is for so long, a large part of the Democratic Party base has been pushing for fight fire with fire. They go low. I'm tired of going high. Let's go low too. And I think that this situation has brought out a little bit of that energy for Democrats, because we're seeing in California and other states too, Democratic governors saying, okay, we can redraw our maps as well. And so I think seeing what other issues spur Democrats to, match Republicans' energy instead of trying to take the high road or trying to say, no, we don't do that. I'm not sure that's, again, I don't know that that's a good precedent to set either. But I think this is what a lot of people have been asking for, have been saying, y'all are being too passive, and we want you to fight back. And I think this is an issue where more Democrats are going to be fighting back. And we've already seen evidence of that.
Misha, do you believe that there is a chance that because of this fighting over House districts, in Texas and now California and quite possibly elsewhere, that this could alienate independent voters?
I mean, again, as I said before, we are already seeing evidence that independent voters have been alienated in general. There was a lot of conversation, and if we remember during the Democratic National Convention when Oprah came out and said, I'm an independent, but I'm supporting Kamala Harris for this reason. But that was a really big push because there were so many independents just choosing not to vote because there was so much confusion during the 2024 election cycle. And so now we look at this redistricting process, and it certainly disenfranchises independent voters. But I think in many ways, again, there's a question is, are we disenfranchising voters in general? I mean, this is certainly in Texas an example of voter suppression in real time. I just read an excellent piece from the Texas Tribune, and I was very impressed again to see them call the spade that it is and say that this was racially based redistricting that happened in Texas. And I think that those kinds of conversations need to just be very clear and blatant so that there's no other confusion as to why things are happening. Like Paige said, it is really interesting to see the Democrats fight in this way. And it's even happening in Maryland, where you have Maryland leaders saying, hey, if we need a redistrict in order to have another congressional district in Prince George's County, let's figure out how to get this done. Since we want to stack race, let's get one of the most highly populated and African Americans county in Prince George's and another congressional leader. And so fighting fire with fire in this case, I think depending on where it's happening might be an interesting solution or reaction. We don't know what the solution will be until we see it play out in full time. But it's nice to see at least people calling this situation what it is, which is that it is race-based. It is to stop people and confuse people from even getting the ability to vote. We know Texas had all those other weird voting rules before that were people all over the country were going to Texas to fight against voter suppression. So this just adds to it in so many ways. Really
let me bring Sam in here on this real quick, and because we're running out of time, and I want to get his opinion about that. And then I also want to give Sam a moment to talk about Howard University's Ron Harris. But first about Texas, Sam.
Yeah, well, I think, I blame the Supreme Court. They basically stopped. They just said, we're not going to judge on gerrymandering. It's political. Let them do whatever they want to. And that's what the Roberts Court has done. Is just say, okay, fine, you can gerrymander, and they don't care about it. So that's, so it's up to each legislature, particularly if they have a super majority, they do what they want to do, and without respect for people. Now, I think last time, if I recall, in the midterm, Trump lost about 40 seats. So the hope here really is that 5 here, 5 there. If the Democrats do things, and if his popularity drops, then it's going to happen anyway. And Texas isn't going to mean much of anything at all right away. And even some of these plans that they're launching, you may recall, is they're saying, well, we're going back to the regular system after this election. So it's one of those kinds of things where they're not necessarily making this permanent, but it is it's the court. I blame the Supreme Court for causing this chaos, because basically they just abrogated their responsibility in terms of judging whether elections are fair or not. And a gerrymander is supposed to be like this little animal that's all over the place because it doesn't meet reality. I think in North Carolina they even split one campus. The district went down the middle of some black school so that they wouldn't have all of them in one district. So it is a mess. But anyway.
Yeah, Sam, I've got about 90 seconds, but go ahead and talk about Ron Harris.
Yes, so Ron Harris was the communications director for Howard University, and as a reporter at Channel 7, I often worked with Ron. He was, in my opinion, probably the best communications director Howard has ever had, because he was a reporter himself. He trusted us. He wasn't afraid of us or didn't hate us, which is some of them have done. Yeah. Nevertheless, he the news is that he was sailing a couple of days ago out in rough seas near Savannah, Georgia. He went out there and basically for a while disappeared. When the Coast Guard was able to look for him, they eventually got to this island, and I'm sorry, I don't know the exact name of it, near Savannah. But it appears that he and his boat both washed ashore. His body was found yesterday, and he's no longer with us. And certainly was a great journalist and a great communications director, and just a very nice person. I dealt with him again, as a news reporter over the years, and a joy. Because honestly, I know you work for Howard, but Howard often was not an easy place to deal with the communications department.
Really?
You're right.
Yeah. Listen, we are, certainly in prayer for his family in this loss, and of course, it's a big loss for the Howard University family. And just to echo, yes, I did work with Ron quite a bit, and this is an unfortunate loss. That's all the time we have. I want to thank Paige Hopkins for coming on with us again. Paige, always good to see you. Misha, your family, always good to see you. Sam, it's good to see that retirement looks good on you as well. So thank you so very, very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That is the Daily Drum for this Thursday, August 21st. I'm Harold Fisher.